It's September 20, 1988. Bright, desert morning in Belen, New Mexico. A 19-year-old woman named Tara Calico clips a water bottle to the frame of her pink Huffy, pushes off the driveway around 9:30 a.m., and heads north on State Road 47 for the kind of long bike ride she'd done dozens of times before. She tells her mother, Patty, "If I'm not back by noon, come get me. 12:30 tennis plans." A routine turned deadline. By noon, she hasn't returned. By afternoon, pieces of her Sony Walkman and a cassette tape are found scattered along the shoulder of the road. The bike is gone. The body is gone. And a question, a single heavy question, sits over a small town and then, eventually, a nation. Where did Tara go? I'm Elena Marquez. This is Still Unanswered. Today, we're going back through the facts, the fragments, the photographs, and the theories in a case that has hovered between hope and grief for nearly 4 decades, the disappearance of Tara Calico. Joining me is Dr. Aaron Kessler, forensic criminologist and a researcher on missing person cases. Aaron, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Elena. It's an honor. And, tough one to sit with.
It is. Before we dive in, a note on tone. We'll be deliberate, we'll acknowledge uncertainty, and we'll avoid sensationalizing. Tara was a real person with plans, friends, a family who never got definitive answers. Aaron, can you say, in a sentence for listeners, what you think is most important to hold in mind going into this story?
Yeah. Hold both things. The emotional truth, a family's life hollowed out by not knowing, and the evidentiary truth, the decades of investigation produced fragments, not a clear path to prosecution. Both are real and both matter.
Right. Both are real. Let's begin with who Tara was, because one of the first things I do in every episode is try to make sure the person at the center of the mystery feels like a human being, not a headline. Tara Calico was born February 28, 1969. She was 19 when she disappeared. Described by friends and family as disciplined, driven, kind, she worked full-time at a local bank while attending college, and she loved fitness. She rode long routes along State Road 47. The ride she took that morning would have been a roughly 36-mile round trip. She knew that road. She trusted that road. Her mother, Patty, used to ride with her until she began to feel followed by a motorist and stop. Patty asked Tara to carry mace. Tara declined. Little details like that, they sit on you when you listen to the whole thing, don't they?
They do. They really do. The small, practical choices, whether to carry mace, to ride with someone, those are exactly the kinds of human details that make this case so hard to think of as anything but forced disappearance when you connect them to the later evidence.
Let's walk the timeline. I'll be specific. If you're following along, and please do, the key day is September 20, 1988. Around 9:30 a.m., Tara leaves home on her pink Huffy mountain bike, yellow sidewalls, white t-shirt, white shorts with green stripes in some descriptions. She tells Patty, "Pick me up if I'm not home by noon." She has tennis at 12:30 with her boyfriend. By 11:45 a.m., multiple witnesses report seeing her on Highway 47. Later that day, when she doesn't return, Patty drives the route. She finds pieces of Tara's Sony Walkman and a cassette tape along the shoulder. The bike is never located. There are no skid marks, no crash scene, no body.
And that's where a lot of investigations stall. No scene, no body, and a handful of witness reports that are helpful but not definitive. The Walkman fragments are compelling, though, suggestive of either a struggle where things fell or of a deliberate attempt to leave a trail, depending on how you interpret it.
Patty, in interviews later on, believed Tara dropped those items on purpose, like markers, as she was forced into a vehicle. That's a heartfelt interpretation. It's also one that can't be proven with what was found. The day becomes a scanner of possibilities. Now, early on, local witnesses reported seeing a light-colored pickup truck with a camper shell following Tara closely. Some accounts suggest an older model, maybe a 1953-54 Ford. Others report a different vehicle. The town was small. People talked. Rumors spread. And the initial investigative theory, depending on whom you asked, floated between a hit-and-run and an abduction, but nothing was settled. Aaron, from a forensic and investigative standpoint, how do you weigh eyewitness vehicle reports that are inconsistent like that?
You weight them carefully. During the late 1980s, especially on rural roads, eyewitness descriptions of vehicles are notoriously unreliable. People can be good at certain details, color, presence of a camper shell, but make mistakes about make and model. Time of day, stress, lighting, and the distance all factor in. That said, multiple independent reports that a vehicle was tailing a cyclist do add probabilistic weight that some vehicle was involved. But linking that vehicle to a person, that's the hard part without physical evidence.
Okay, so the timeline stalls. The search expands. Then, months later, something that would come to define this story turns up 1,900 miles away. June 15th, 1989, Port St. Joe, Florida. A convenience store customer finds a Polaroid photograph in a parking space. She remembers a white, windowless van having been parked there moments earlier. She remembers the driver as a mustached man in his 30s. The photo shows a young woman who, to some, like Tara, lying on what appears to be a mat in the back of a vehicle, gagged with black duct tape, hands behind her. Next to her is a young boy, also gagged. A paperback, reportedly V.C. Andrews' My Sweet Audrina, is visible in the frame. The young woman in the photo has a scar on her leg, a detail that Tara's mother, Patty, later pointed to as confirmation.
And here's where the story starts to split sharply. The Polaroid is powerful as an image and as a narrative pivot. For a family, it is a tangible sign, something to hold. For investigators, it's evidence to be analyzed, and analyses in this case produced disagreement. Scotland Yard reportedly said the woman could be Tara. Los Alamos National Laboratory said she was not. The FBI said the result was inconclusive. And Polaroid officials said the film stock used wasn't available before May 1989, placing the photo at least 8 months after Tara vanished. So, if it's Tara, she was alive months after her disappearance.
Patty looked at that image and said unequivocally that she believed it was her daughter. Michael Henley's mother, Michael was a 9-year-old who disappeared in April of 1988, thought the boy resembled her son. But in June 1990, Michael's remains were found in the Zuni Mountains, roughly 7 miles from where he vanished. Evidence suggested exposure, not long-distance abduction. That complicates the idea that the boy in the Polaroid traveled to Florida at the same time as the woman. So you have a photograph that produces hope, a family convinced, labs disagreeing, and a timeline that doesn't line up neatly. Aaron, from a forensic photo perspective, what are the limits of identifying a person from a single Polaroid, especially one taken in 1989?
The limits are significant. First, you need high-quality images of the missing person at similar angles, with known, reliable distinguishing features. Scar comparisons, for instance, can be helpful, but scars shift with posture and lighting. They can be deceptive. Second, late 80s photo analysis lacked modern digital enhancement and facial recognition tools. Labs could look at facial proportions, moles, scars, and clothing, but there's a lot of observer error. Third, emotional investment, like a parent believing a photo shows their child, can bias interpretation. Experts try to correct for that, but human judgment is part of the process. So the best you can often say is consistent with or inconclusive, which is frustrating when a family wants a definitive yes.
And for listeners, it's worth saying differing opinions from reputable labs do not mean one side is lying. They mean that the evidence doesn't resolve the question. But emotionally, of course, people want resolution. Let's step back and talk about the other major theory about what happened that day, the so-called local boys theory. The story goes that a group of teenage boys, some of whom knew Tara, may have been following or harassing her, and that an accident or panic led to an abduction and then disposal. A former sheriff publicly said he thought a group of local boys were responsible and that families helped cover it up. That's a heavy allegation for any small town.
It is, and from an investigative perspective, those claims are hard to pursue without corroborating physical evidence. The sheriff's public statements, and I say this carefully, can be a double-edged sword. They can galvanize a community and generate tips, but they can also create reputational harm if made without prosecutable evidence. The challenges in cases like this are classic. Decades pass, memories fade, people die, and records get lost. When someone says, "I know who did it," but cannot produce independent corroboration, prosecutors are reluctant to charge because wrongful prosecution is a real risk.
Right. And from the family's angle, especially friends like Melinda Esquibel, there's long-running suspicion that the sheriff's office misstepped and perhaps protected locals. Melinda has been an advocate. She produced a podcast and documentary project called Vanished, the Tara Calico story, and she asserts the case was mishandled. Those accusations of institutional failure are part of what fuels public frustration in cold cases.
And again, that frustration is understandable, but we also have to acknowledge the evidentiary reality. In the absence of a body or DNA, cases rely on witness testimony, admissions, and physical links. Those are difficult to obtain after so many years, particularly if there was an attempted cover-up. If you think about it, the perfect storm for leaving investigators with no body is a remote, rural route, a transporter vehicle capable of hiding evidence, and either willing or intimidated witnesses.
The stranger abduction theory also remains plausible. A passing truck driver, a transient, someone who followed her route. Witnesses did describe a light-colored pickup with a camper shell. And if the Polaroid were genuine and taken in the back of a van, that would fit the idea of a stranger transporting victims across state lines. But there are gaps. No vehicle was ever identified from that Florida sighting, and the mustached man who might have dropped the Polaroid was never found. It's worth pausing here to reflect on how the Polaroid amplified two competing narratives, one of a local crime, one of a transient predator. It's almost like the photo forced the town to look outward and inward at once.
Exactly. And where the Polaroid shines a light, it also casts shadows. It generated national media attention. Unsolved mysteries, a current affair, America's Most Wanted. That attention brought tips and scrutiny, but it also attracted hoaxes and false leads that consumed investigators' time.
Let's talk about the consequences for Tara's family. Patty Doel became the face of the search. She appeared on TV shows, guarded that Polaroid, and kept pushing until her death in 2006, still waiting for answers. In 1998, a judge declared Tara legally dead and ruled the death a homicide. That's a legal recognition, but it doesn't equal closure. Erin, as someone who's worked with families in these in-between states, not knowing whether a loved one is alive or not, what does that do to people over decades?
It creates what psychologists call ambiguous loss. It's different from a death where you have a funeral and a grave to visit. With ambiguous loss, you don't have a body, which prevents closure and complicates grief. People can become frozen in a state of hope that keeps them searching, or in a prolonged mourning. That, sadly, becomes an ongoing burden, affecting relationships, finances, employment, and physical health. Families often become quasi-investigative units themselves, which can be empowering but also exhausting.
Patty waited until the day she died. Her activism kept the case alive in the media for years. After Patty's death, siblings and friends, including Melinda, kept at it. They embraced podcasts and new media to keep public interest alive. That's part of a broader shift. Families now often bypass traditional media gatekeepers and bring cold cases into online communities. That can help, but it can create problems too, right?
Right. Online sleuthing has benefits. New eyes, crowdsourced detective work, the possibility that someone in the public has a piece of information. But it also carries risks, misidentifying people, spreading rumors, and harassing individuals who were never charged. Ethical true crime practice requires restraint, and that's harder to achieve in the internet age.
Let's move into modern developments. This case never went completely cold. The FBI announced a reward in 2019, up to $20,000, for information leading to Tara's location and the arrest and conviction of those responsible. In fall 2021, investigators executed a sealed search warrant at a Valencia County residence. Then, in June 2023, the Valencia County Sheriff's Office said investigators had made substantial progress and had identified the offenders and had submitted evidence to the district attorney. But as of early 2026, there have been no public indictments or convictions tied to those public statements.
Which puts investigators in a tough, almost awkward spot. On one hand, public statements that you've identified offenders can reassure the public that efforts continue. On the other hand, if you go public with that claim and don't have charges, it raises questions. Why no arrests? Are you lacking admissible evidence? Or are you following procedural steps before making the information public? Prosecutors generally don't comment on pending investigations, so there can be legitimate legal reasons for withholding names while the work continues.
There's also the risk that public declarations without follow-through can erode trust. Families hear, "We know who did it," and expect arrests. Years later, if nothing changes, frustration deepens. Melinda and others have expressed both hope and skepticism when county officials made those statements. It's such a fragile balance. I want to pause and ask you a specific technical question, Erin. Suppose investigators in 2020-2021 obtained new witness statements or a confession from an aging suspect who recalls the event. Without a body, how strong is that for prosecution?
It depends on the substance and corroboration. A confession alone can be powerful, but confessions must be corroborated to be admissible and reliable. If a suspect remembers a unique detail that matches something only the perpetrator would know, the location of the thrown Walkman parts, a specific scar, a burial site, that can be critical. Additional supporting evidence, witness placement, physical traces, DNA, if any exists, strengthens the case. In the absence of a body, prosecutors must be confident they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a homicide occurred and that a particular defendant committed it. That's why many jurisdictions are cautious with prosecutions in decades-old cases.
So the identification of offenders that the sheriff announced could be based on statements, withheld corroborative evidence, or prosecutor strategy. Still, for people outside the justice system, those words read like arrests are imminent, and when they're not, disappointment follows.
Exactly.
One of the themes I want us to keep returning to in this episode is the Polaroid as symbol, not only as a piece of contested evidence, but as a kind of Rorschach image. Family sees life, some labs see uncertainty, the press sees drama. How should we interpret that photograph now, almost 4 decades later?
We should treat it as an item of unknown provenance that needed and needs more context. Forensic photo analysis has advanced a lot since 1989. Today, you can do more with imaging. You can cross-reference metadata if it exists, though with analog Polaroids, there's no embedded metadata like a digital file. You could still do comparative facial analysis, consider posture and clothing for time estimates, and perhaps run the paper through chemical tests if the original is available. But the core problem remains. You still need independent corroboration. A photograph alone, even a powerful one, rarely closes a case.
And for listeners, a quick clarification. Polaroid officials said the film in that photo wasn't sold before May 1989. That simply tells us the photo couldn't have been taken immediately after September 1988. It's at least several months later. If it's Tara, she survived beyond the day she disappeared. If it's not Tara, the photo is another distracting artifact. Either way, it deepens the mystery. We've talked through the main theories: local boys/cover-up, stranger abduction, runaways. The runaway theory is the weakest here. Family ties, work and school commitments, and the Walkman fragments together make a voluntary disappearance unlikely. But another angle worth addressing is how the 1980s investigative toolkit limited what could be done then and what modern tools might still do now.
Yes. In the 1980s, there was no national DNA database of the type we have today. No ubiquitous CCTV. No cell phone records to place vehicles and people. Image analysis was pre-digital. All of that hampered investigations. But advances matter. Genetic genealogy has unlocked cold cases in recent years, and digital reconstruction can sometimes reanalyze old photographs in productive ways. The question is there recoverable biological material tied to Tara's disappearance? Without physical evidence, hair, blood, tissue, genetic genealogy can't help. So it remains a case where investigative legwork and human intelligence are crucial.
We have a moment in the script planned for a listener question. What should someone do if they remember something now, 40 years later, that might be relevant? Aaron, practical steps?
Call investigators. If you're in Valencia County, contact the Valencia County Sheriff's Office. If you prefer anonymity, the FBI has channels for tips, and there's often a reward system. Write down everything you remember before calling: dates, approximate times, locations, vehicle descriptions, names. Even details that feel trivial can be vital. The color of a hubcap, a unique bumper sticker, a campsite conversation. Memories can be fragile, so document them quickly. And if you're unsure, call and let investigators sort it out.
And note, listeners, making a tip doesn't mean you'll be dragged into a court case or labeled a suspect. Often investigators need small nodes of information to connect larger threads. We'll put contact info in the episode notes. Before we move to closing reflections, I want to return to the human side for a few minutes. Tara's mother, Patty, treated the Polaroid as proof that Tara was alive somewhere. She chased every lead, went on TV, stood in shopping malls handing out flyers. That sort of devotion is its own kind of story, one of love mixed with grief and desperation. Melinda Esquibel, Tara's childhood friend, has said the case was a huge misjustice and has spent years trying to get answers. The siblings, friends, and remaining family members are still alive with this pain.
And it's important to note that families doing advocacy work often end up performing investigative functions that overwhelmed local police departments never had resources to do. They become archivists, publicists, tip collectors, and sometimes, sadly, targets of online speculation. That community labor keeps a case in public memory, which can be essential if an investigation reaches a bottleneck and needs public pressure to move forward.
That's one of the core motifs of Still Unanswered, how the persistence of people, families, friends, small teams of advocates, can keep a case alive in the absence of institutional momentum. But persistence isn't a substitute for evidence that will hold up in court. I want to ask you one more tough question, Aaron. Given what we know now, the Walkman fragments, the truck reports, the Polaroid, the sealed search warrant in 2021, the 2023 claim that offenders were identified, do you feel the case is solvable?
I feel cautiously optimistic that it might be solvable. We've seen cases where persistence pays off. New witnesses come forward, someone with a conscience decides to speak, or physical evidence hides in plain sight until someone re-examines it. The fact that investigators executed a sealed warrant in 2021 and told the public they identified suspects suggests they are following lines of evidence that could be prosecutable. But cautious optimism. Prosecutors need admissible evidence meeting a high standard. So, solvable? Possibly. Certain? No. And that uncertainty is a heavy thing to carry for everyone involved.
Cautious optimism. That's a good phrase for this case. We owe listeners some clarifications, a brief mythbuster, if you will. Myth 1. The Polaroid proves Tara was trafficked to Florida. Not proven. Labs disagree, and the FBI called the photo inconclusive. Myth 2. The boy in the photo was definitely Michael Henley. Again, unlikely. Michael's remains were found near his campsite, and his death is consistent with exposure. Myth 3. Police know exactly who did it and are refusing to act. The sheriff's office has said they identified offenders, but there have been no public charges. Prosecutors need admissible evidence. Myth 4. Tara ran away. Highly inconsistent with her life and plans. Myth 5. The case is cold and inactive. Not true. FBI rewards, sealed warrants, and public statements show activity.
Those clarifications are important. Media narratives can ossify into misinformation. This case has lived in the space between media myth and evidentiary reality for decades.
As we close, I want to read a brief passage I recorded from an interview with one of Tara's friends years ago. She said, "Every place I go, there's the absence. You walk into a room and you expect a sibling or a cousin to be there, and they're not. It's like waiting for someone who will never come back, but you still wait." That sentence, that suspended waiting, is what defines the human cost of unresolved disappearances.
That line captures ambiguous loss in one image.
Listeners, as always, if this episode stirs a memory for you, anything small, please consider contacting the Valencia County Sheriff's Office or the FBI tip line. We will include the numbers and a link in the episode notes. And to the family members and friends listening, we hear you. We don't pretend today's hour heals what decades have worn thin, but we hope it widens the spotlight gently and accurately. Aaron, any final thoughts before we sign off?
Only this. Treat evidence with humility and people with compassion. Cases like Tara's teach us that both scientific rigor and human empathy are required. And keep pushing for rigorous, patient investigation. Justice often comes late, but it matters enormously when it does.
Thank you, Aaron. For those who want more detail, we've included a reading list in the show notes. The People Deep Dive from 2025, archived local reporting, and entries summarizing the Polaroid controversy. We tried to keep this episode free of score, of theatrical music. The silence between facts matters here. I'm Alina Marquez. This is Still Unanswered. We'll be back with another episode that explores what happens when the evidence runs out and the questions remain. Good night. If you have information on Tara's disappearance, contact Valencia County Sheriff's Office, the FBI tip line, or submit information anonymously through Crime Stoppers. We'll include those numbers in the notes.